Bulgaria, one of the South Slavic nations in the Balkans, a nation surrounded by enemies that is known to be as the Prussia of the Balkans. And today I will be showing Bulgaria's power by stealing Serbia's dream of forming Yugoslavia and making a stronger version of it in Kaiserreich. Of course, this wouldn't be a Kaiserreich video if there was no event telling how shitty the starting situation is, especially with the enemy neighbors at all sides. So, of course, to combat this, Bulgaria starts with a focus to quell the Serbians in the region of Nice. But this comes at a cost, as with all of this power handed to the government, politicians are actually starting to become worried about this absolutist law. So now we have a three-way political struggle between the liberal government, the absolutist dynasty, and the scheming military. And to access this secret path that is to form Yugoslavia, we need the military to take action, and for that it's time to join the Zveno conspiracy. Since this is Kaiserreich and Kaiserreich loves their minigames, to make sure the Zveno coup not only takes place but is also successful, we need to let the largest bank go bankrupt so that the Zveno has the perfect opportunity to strike. It also helps to take some decisions to bash the monarchy, but this is the best way to get this done. With the coup being a success, the Zveno is now in charge and ready to make some sweeping political changes. But first, we must prepare ourselves for the conflict with those resentful Serbians and Romanians as they are rapidly rearming. To make sure we don't fight a four-way war, it's time to go to Constantinople and make some arrangements with the Turks. But hey, if you're interested in seeing a four-way conflict with Bulgaria, you can check out the other secret path here. Shameless self-sponsor over. The negotiations began, and just to make sure the Ottoman AI would not be bothering me, I decided to accept all of their conditions. And now, with this done, the Ottomans will not interfere in the following conflict and will actually even support me. So hey, at least I now have a temporary ally. But just after signing the agreement, the Serbians declared war upon us. And if you're trying this out, you will probably receive support from the Ottomans and Albania, Austria and Germany. But for this secret path to work, you must refuse all German and Austrian support. This means no Lend-Lease and also no volunteers. And also, you will see that there is a focus to get some German support. You must also not take that focus to get the secret option. Anyhow, the war started, and to say that you will be outnumbered, well, it would be a big understatement. So, in this case, I decided to position my troops in a more defensible positions in Bulgaria, like the mountainous and hills and forest regions, to even have a shot at this. Even then, I made sure that even if I started to retreat from some of the positions, I would still control Macedonia. That basically triggers the event where you will be asked to surrender. So as long as Macedonia and Sofia does not fall, we still, have a shot at this. Using my good infantry divisions, I use them to take some encirclement opportunities, especially against the Romanians, which are the ones that have the most amount of troops. So I needed to thin down, their army. I managed to encircle some troops on the eastern front, not once, but twice, even though I was forced to retreat in some places. Oh, and a new child was born from the monarchy, and stepping outside the conflict. Since I know jack shit about Bulgarian history, I decided to call him the first option, so... Back to the war, I closed the second pocket yet again, leaving the Romanians with a lot of casualties in the process, and with their troops thinned out by 2 pockets, it was time to mount an offensive to the north, so that's what I did. I pushed inside Romanian territory, encircling more troops in the process, and best of all, I managed to cut off Romania in 2. This was perfect as I cleaned up some troops stuck in Moldavia. With Moldavia secured and the other fronts holding the Belgrade Pact at the bay, I decided to start my offensive to take Bucharest, to push the Romanians out of this conflict for good. And to be fair, it fell relatively quickly actually. Soon enough, after this, the Romanians capitulated, leaving the Serbian border wide open. So I blitzkrieged, if that verb even exists, my way into Belgrade and into other major Serbian cities, and they surrendered shortly afterwards. Leaving Greece as the only country in the war. As part of the Greek army was killed in Romania, I snaked my way towards Athens, cutting off the rest of their troops. But wouldn't you know it, guess who decided to come to the negotiating table? Yeah, the Serbians thought that only after facing complete defeat is now the time they want to surrender and be left alone. Well, guess what, buddy? You lost that opportunity a long time ago, and so after refusing their deal, the whole pack surrendered, and so once again Bulgaria stands victorious in the Balkans. Of course, even though I would like to keep Romania and Greece under occupation, I have more to gain if they become my puppets thanks to a special focus tree that deals with repayments for the war. But with Serbia, if everything went according to plan, there should be a second option to seek a new Yugoslav direction. Yes, folks, we just basically stole Serbia's role as the main unifier of the South Slavs, opening new options in the focus tree for creating Yugoslavia. So you could call it Yugoslavism with Bulgarian characteristics.
Deeply in your final moments, chosen one. For now your existence ends in shame. All the power that was once yours is mine. Forever.
But before anything can happen, I just need to borrow, and when I say borrow, I really mean steal Romania's oil supply, since I was the victor in the conflict. After some months of preparation, it was time to begin, well, preparing the actual operation for a war with the Habsburg Empire and claim victory over their imperialism. But before anything, those bloody Serbians can never stay down, and just like in the last Bulgarian video, the Chetniks have begun their operation, so let me deal with those first.
Many months later.
So after doing the shitty minigame yet again, the Chetniks were destroyed, and now we can continue on preparing for the big operations. Since the Serbians don't exactly like us, we shall seek cooperation with Montenegro instead. Also, since we are supporting Montenegro, we might as well support the Romanian claims in Transylvania. As well, they actually might prove useful in the conflict against the Austrians. And before the operation can begin, we shall seek support from our other South Slavic brothers under the Austrian boot to support our cause. But big news came from Austria, as they have federalized, meaning that they are now united under a single state. Translation, they are no longer different uncoordinated armies, so with that bombshell dropped, I decided it was time to start the operation before the Austrians could become even stronger. With the operation being a full go, the Austrians started bashing their heads into my defenses, with level 3 forts in the most vulnerable sections of the front, over and over and over again. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, the French and the Germans were starting up things, and so the Second Weltkrieg started. To the surprise of no one, Russia intervened as usual, but it was still dealing with those Austrians launching their death charges. By this point, since my military buildup was finished, I started the Zveno reforms, as you need to finish the entire Zveno tree to form Yugoslavia, apart from getting all the needed land from Austria. The Austrians kept their death charges to the point where they had almost lost all the manpower available, but I wanted them to keep bleeding. The reforms of the Zveno have two choices, basically Republican or Tsarist, with a more radical top option being always the Republican and the bottom being the more moderate one. They also give different bonuses or modifiers depending on the choices you make. In this case, I just chose the moderate options because I thought the bonuses that they give were better overall. In general, there are 4 major choices, and depending on which faction you support, they will lead to different outcomes, but that's a bit of a spoiler.
Oops! Spoilers.
Meanwhile, back to the front, after the Austrians continued to launch their death charges, but since they were depleted, I decided to start a push of my own, where not only I started retaking some lost provinces, but I also managed to get a new opening in Dalmatia, where it was the easiest place to push, as everywhere else, it was either mountains or hills. And in the case of Dalmatia, it's all plain, so it's a perfect place for a push. The second reform was here, and we could either go full brutalist mode with the culture of loyalty and obedience, or go with the more moderate option of public morality. And since I already covered some of the other dark paths in other mods and whatnot, yeah, let's just be relatively moderate this time. Now it was time to decide the future of the economy though. I continued to push in Dalmatia relatively unopposed, and seeing a great encirclement opportunity, I decided to start pushing from the eastern side, trying to close the pocket in Bosnia. After some fighting, the pocket was closed, leaving part of the Austrian army completely cut off, and soon they would be crushed in the mountains of Bosnia. But before they could be completely wiped out from the region, it was time to decide the future of the economy. We could strive for a complete domination of the market with the state controlling everything, or just be more interventionist in our policies. I think you already know what option I picked. And now for the final reform, where we shall decide the future of the political system. The pocket in Bosnia was destroyed, and so we could refocus our attention to the front and push north, continue the liberation of our Slavic brothers as the Austrians kept getting more casualties. And now that we took the Bosnian region, it was now far easier to start pushing into Austria and Hungary proper. The final decision was now in place. We could establish a house of corporations, replacing the old parliament, where it would basically be formed by various interest groups, very technocratic in a way, or we could try and stabilize the country first instead of making a big move like that. And maybe it's better to keep things under a status quo, especially with those bonuses that it gives. The war was still underway, and before I knew it, Vienna, the great Habsburg capital, had fallen to our troops. With this, I refocused my attention towards Budapest and Hungary, as I was reaching a stalemate in the rest of Austria thanks to the Alps. And just as I was about to reach the gate of Budapest, well, the ultimatum came. The cowardly Austrians have decided to run to the Germans as they can no longer keep fighting. As such, the Germans have sent their ultimatum to leave the Austrians and make peace while we take our claimed lands. Signing the peace treaty, means, of course, the peace, and also we would acquire the required land to form Yugoslavia. Or I could try and continue the war, but that means joining the Second Weltkrieg. In this situation, I decided to peace out, but before peacing out, I decided to call my Romanian puppet into the war so they could get the Transylvanian lands during the peace deal. And so at this point, I had the required lands to form Yugoslavia. But I was still not content with the Austrians being left alive, so I changed my mind and decided to start justifying as soon as possible to get into the Second Weltkrieg after all. I declared war, and because the Austrian troops left the front line to fight in other places, I just walked unopposed to Budapest and marched to Vienna for a second time. But now the German troops arrived as the Austrians still joined the Reichspakt. I managed to take the Austrian capital for the second time, but they still controlled the rest of their empire, so I rushed to get both Prague and Krakow, as those were the remaining important cities still under the control of the Austrians. After taking both major cities, the Austrians were in the verge of capitulation, but they still refused to do so. So I just marched into a random little victory point, and bam, there they go. I continued helping out in the war as far as fighting in Italy and even taking Berlin itself. Moments after that, the entire Reichspakt surrendered, and so it was time to divide the spoils of war. With Bulgaria finally being at peace, it was finally time to embrace a new Bulgarian age where the final question must be answered. Shall we keep the monarchy or not? As always, after a war, it was time to release some puppets like Prussia, Austria, Czechoslovakia, and our other Slavic brothers, and also the Hungarians. And so the world now looked like this, the Third International on one side and the Russian Mayonnaise on the other, while having a neutral bloc between them. As I said before, since I took most or all of the monarchist options, well, it was no surprise that the radical Republican faction got ousted, and so the monarchy shall stay as an integral part of Bulgarian society, but with a lot less power. As a side note, here is the event if you decide to go for Republican and if anyone was interested in how it plays out. Well, anyway, with that aside, it was finally time to form the great Yugoslavian state. A new focus tree has opened to basically integrate the rest of the provinces, restructure the economy, and open some new foreign diplomatic options. And this would not be a Balkan video if we didn't crush the Turks. So now that they are weakened than ever since the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and we are in our right to do so since the original pact was with the Ottoman Empire, not with the Republic of Turkey, you know. Crossing into Anatolia proper can be a nightmare in certain circumstances, like in this one, but I managed to get across after a few weeks. The Turks tried to negotiate a peace between us, where I would just take Adrianople, but no, we shall push the Turks out of Europe completely. And now that's mega Yugoslavia right there if you ask me. But now it's time to release a Turkish state in Anatolia, but Carigrad will remain ours. And that's it for today's video. I know it was a wild ride, for sure, and I know it was it was a bit longer than my usual videos, as there was a lot of content here. But I hope you enjoyed it. Well, enjoyed it either way. If you enjoyed the video and would like to see this type of content, subscribe, as this helps out my channel. This was Defectus. You are dismissed, soldier.